Baby, can't you hear my call? I can't stand.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Sims, and welcome to another edition of the Hey Now podcast with my sons, Jarrett and Jordan. Jarrett's with us today, celebrating an Eagles victory over the Green Bay Packers, but that's for another story for another time, maybe later on in the show. I want to welcome in a guy. When I got my job with the Mariners back in 07, and as I go around the American League and start meeting all the broadcast teams, the friendliest, the nicest guy, and that's saying a lot because everybody's great in baseball, but the best. Tom Hamilton joins us, the voice of the Cleveland Guardians. And we are delighted to have him here for many reasons. And one of them, he's a great guy, but one of them, he is going into the Hall of Fame, the Ford C. Frick Award winner for broadcasting excellence in baseball. He is this year's winner. Tom, hey, man, congratulations. Congratulations. That is a fabulous honor. You've been with the Indians/Guardians for a long time, and now, boy, you get saluted with the biggest award we got in the game.
Well, thank you very much, David and Jarrett. I appreciate you having me on, and right back at you. There's nobody I respect more as a broadcaster or as a person than you, David. And I'm just keeping the seat warm because you'll be there someday too. And congratulations on being nominated this year. I'm a 3-time loser, so
Stop it.
But we're very grateful, and you're humbled, and you know how blessed you are, one, to get this job. And none of us get in this business thinking, well, maybe someday I'll be in the Hall of Fame. And so we were shocked, but we're delighted, obviously. But it's been very humbling, and it's still very surreal. Guys, I keep waiting for that phone call to come from Cooperstown going, Tom, I don't know how to put this to you, but you made a mistake.
What was it like when you got the phone call?
I guess because I'd gone through this 3 times before and didn't get a phone call. That's how this works. 10 of us are nominated. Obviously, you were one of them this year, David. And, John Shefstakowski, one of the vice presidents of the Hall of Fame, tells you when you've been nominated. I can't even remember, honestly, when it was, if it was August, September, October, when we were told that, hey, just be available by phone that day, which in this case was December 11th. If you're the one selected, we will call you that morning. If you don't get a phone call, that means you weren't selected. So again, having gone 3 times before and not getting a call and not expecting a call. I mean, Hawk Harrelson went in. Pat Hughes went in. Joe Castiglione went in. The other years I was nominated, I didn't expect a call. I didn't expect a call this time either. And when it got to 11 o'clock, my wife was like, and we've been doing busy stuff around the house, getting ready for Christmas, getting the kids back in from all over the country. She goes, I'm supposed to go to lunch with a friend at noon. Should I go? And I go, oh my gosh, yes. I said, we're not getting a phone call. It's 11 o'clock. If we were going to hear, we would have heard much earlier than now. And so she got ready to go to lunch, and at 11:40, the phone rang, and I could not have been more flabbergasted because, David and Jarrett, at that time, I was like, hey, no big deal. Somebody else much more deserving got the phone call. I didn't think a phone call would come at 11:40, and then they released the news at noon. You know why now? Because, they asked you not to call your kids, not to call anybody. The ball club didn't know because they want to release it at noon, and they don't want, in today's world of social media, somebody posting it before they've made the announcement. So,
but you did call your wife before the 12 o'clock embargo, I'm assuming.
You know what, Jared? This is the worst thing. I thought she was gone. I had been downstairs working out. Phone rang. I ran upstairs and wanted her to be a part of it. House is dead silent. I assumed she was gone. She was still in the bedroom getting ready. So I walk into the bedroom going, what? After the phone call, and she goes, yeah, what's up? And I'm like, oh no. I'm still paying for that one, Jared. So
never hear the end. Who was the first call after you were able to call somebody, and who did you chat with, and what was that like?
You know what? Jared, it's a great question. And honestly, I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. You literally black out, or so it feels. Again, maybe because I was so caught off guard. Look, if you're one of the nominees, you have a chance. It's a 10% chance. And when you haven't heard from anybody and it's 11:40, you're like, okay, no biggie. It was great to be nominated. And who knows? Can't wait to hear who got it so I can call that person. But they asked, then you had to do a national media thing right away at 12:30. I had to hop in the shower because I was a mess. And so the kids started to call. Yeah.
The avalanche of phone calls and texts must have been overwhelming. It's probably something you maybe have not experienced, correct?
No, normally in this business, you're used to getting letters written in crayon and telling you suck. And so you're like, at least I didn't get any of those. um, David, you heard, you're one of the first people I heard from. And I'm not trying to sound pretentious because it'll happen, Jared, for your dad someday, and the response will be even more overwhelming. I had 500 emails and text messages within 24 hours.
I believe it.
It's, um, it's people you're just never expected to hear from. And I don't want to single anybody out because then you're missing somebody and you don't want to offend anyone. But I will
Right.
say the most stunning phone call that I got, and you also have to remember now the day is just, it's completely out of whack. One, you don't know how to
Yeah,
react. Secondly,
right.
you're getting calls from the Hall of Fame trying to tell you some things. You're getting calls from other people you can't answer just because you're on the phone with somebody else. But that night, my wife and I are sitting around the table, and we probably had about a 10-minute period where we could just kind of look at each other and go, what the heck just happened? And the phone rings. It's a number I don't recognize. So I'm probably like everybody else in America. You don't answer that call because it's usually a bogus call, which means it's a robocall, which means you're getting 10 more in the next hour. I happened to answer it because you thought, who knows? It's Johnny Bench.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
Whoa.
it was stunning. And to this day, I mean, he calls and I'm back 12 years old as a kid.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure Johnny Bench is like today probably going, this guy makes his living talking based on that phone call. I don't know about that.
Would you have a case of the Abadabbas?
We've all been around so many great athletes and great people. But to me, if you ever lose that, where certain people still, man, this is the greatest catcher that ever played the game. For him, I'm not a player. Yes, we're going into the Hall of Fame, but as I said to my kids, we're in a closet right off the wing where all the players are. It's the Players Hall of Fame. They're the ones that are the attraction. We're grateful to be a small part of it. But when somebody of that significance calls you and welcomes you, and somebody I don't know and have really not had any dealings with, and the things he said, he had obviously done some research so that, he was aware of what you've done, where you've done it, how long you've done it, and had some great advice on just a simple thing, guys. Get yourself, first off, he goes, do you mind if I offer some advice? And I'm like, you're Johnny Bench. You can tell me anything. And he said, get a journal, get a diary, and keep notes. Every day something happens, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a note from somebody, whether it's somebody you met and talked to that day because of what just transpired earlier today, getting the phone call from the Hall of Fame. He said the next 7 months are going to be a blur. It'll go by so quickly, and you'll appreciate being able to look back at that and remember things that maybe you forgot about. And, so, Tony Kubek called. I mean, he's a fellow Wisconsinite that I think all of us would agree is, I think, the best player ever turned broadcaster in the history of the business. And that's not to slight anybody in our game, but Tony Kubek did it, Jared, long before your mom and dad even knew each other. When, Tony could do it all and was such a gracious and kind person. And, Jim Cott calling. And, again, I don't want to start slighting people, but it was that kind of a day where, boy, you just know how blessed you've been.
That's awesome. That's a terrific, incredible roster of guys you just mentioned right there. My next question, of course, is do you have any ideas of what you want to say in your speech? I know somebody's going to come up to you and tell, hey, kid, keep it short.
Oh, I've already been told that. I've picked the brains of, people like Pat Hughes and Joe Castiglione, and I still have them both on speed dial. They're probably like, man, I can't wait for August when this thing is over. They've been great, guys to go to for advice. I've listened to their speeches, thought they were both terrific. Yeah. I've listened to other Hall of Fame speeches. No, I don't know. I haven't sat down and I have to now start putting it together because, once the season starts, you get pretty busy. Yeah. And, Joe had said, you don't have to sit down and do the speech now. Just sit down and start formulating some ideas, some people you want to mention. And that's always the hard part. I've done a couple of eulogies for a couple of great partners of mine, Herb Score and Mike Keegan. And, I think David and Jarrett, those were the two hardest things I've ever done in my life. I mean,
I'll bet.
Because you feel such a responsibility to not disappoint the family, and while it's not about you, it's about their loved one that day. And you just, there are no words you can ever say that truly comfort somebody. So I think those experiences help from the standpoint of, you got to get it together. You got to get it down on paper. And I'm such an emotional idiot anyway, that'll be the hard part.
Make sure you get your wife to help you to craft that thing.
Yeah.
And more importantly, maybe early on and at the back end of the speech, you thank your wife.
Don't forget, I think all of us know in this business, anybody that's in baseball, I think more so than any other sport, if you don't have a great wife who's a great mother, we have no chance.
Exactly right. No chance. Exactly the two words.
She gave up her career. She was a radio and television news person, reporter, anchor. Gave up that career when we moved to Cleveland. We had a 2-month-old when we moved to Cleveland. We raised 4 kids in Cleveland. And without her, none of this happens because nothing goes wrong when you're at home. It's only when you're on the road.
Shout out to my mother, Abby Sims, the best. So when I was a kid, I went to school in the Bronx, grew up in Manhattan, and she would get breakfast, ready and go off to work as one of the best physical therapists in New York, and go to all my games. And through had catch with me. Yeah. I learned to throw as much because my mom is my dad. You were calling, I don't know, at that time would have been on the road before. Yeah, Big East football and basketball. And then Dad, when you got the Mariner job, Mom was flying coast to coast every Thursday from New York to Seattle because you had 2 homes, 2 places. So, my mom, I'm super grateful for my mom. So you put it on a tee. So Mom, if she's listening, thank you for helping me out.
And you know what, Jared, you're so right. In this business, Dave and I are the lucky ones. There are a lot of marriages that don't survive. And, we're the lucky ones. And, we had 4 very active children, 2 boys that played D1 and played in the minor leagues. And the amount of games she had to go to on her own and the amount of meals you need to keep warm, and just your point, Jared, teaching you things, the one thing I did learn, Jared, so this is a piece of advice for you. David doesn't need it. When you get a phone call on the road, and she's had one of those days, somebody fell out of the tree, had to take all 4 to the ER room, then the air conditioning broke in the house. whatever you do, don't be a smart aleck on the other end and say, honey, it's been a hard day here in Seattle. They did not toast the bun on my cheeseburger the way I like it. That's going to cost you a lot of roses.
Yeah. Drop everything, listen. And also I've learned, don't try and solve the problems necessarily. Just listen.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
you remind me I'm a huge Sopranos fan. So Tony is away in Italy and he says, why don't you take the kids to the Great Wall? And she's like, if I need your permission to get Chinese.
So true. What's your wife's name and how long have you been married? Sound like Dick Clark.
Wendy. Yep. Wendy is her name. We're going on 37 years.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So it started in Waterloo, Wisconsin, not to be confused with Waterloo, Iowa.
Yep.
The great state of Wisconsin, where Jordy went to school at the University of Wisconsin. You played a lot of ball, I'm going to guess, right? Growing up, high school.
But I mean, if you look up the word mediocre, there's my high school picture. So
what position? What sport? What position? What are we talking about?
I played them all, and never rose above mediocrity. But again, that's how it is for most kids in high school. And, I had very supportive parents. My first 12 years were spent on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. And, I have such great admiration for people that work farms because that's work.
Oh, baby.
That's work. And I saw how hard my mom and dad worked. I mean, no matter how well they milked those cows in the morning, they had to be milked again that night. So, you learn the work ethic from them. And, we had 5 children in our family and then moved to the metropolis of Waterloo that is still without a traffic light.
Stop it. Really?
Oh. No, we have stop signs, but there's no need for a traffic light. When we moved to town, it was a town of 2,000, about a half an hour outside of Madison, an hour outside of Milwaukee. So, but it was a great place to grow up. It was a very athletic community. It was, again, I'm dating myself, but back in the 70s, everybody went to the games on Friday night. If you wanted to rob somebody's house, rob it on Friday night, because everybody was either at the football stadium or at the high school gymnasium. So I just think I grew up in a great time, and when high school sports were such a big deal in most communities, they still are, don't get me wrong. But, my kids grew up, in the suburbs of Cleveland, and there are a lot more distractions. There are a lot more things to do on a Friday night. So while high school sports are important, I don't think they're the end all that maybe they were in the community that I grew up in.
A lot of people looking for a come up today who are on the other side of the law are following the Tom Hamilton book of breaking and entering. These NFL players, they're at risk when they're playing games.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Hey, those guys have already been hit. You saw Mahomes' house and a few other guys have been hit around the league.
And they have a lot better security systems than the rest of us do. So, I don't know. You get me on my soapbox, but it's like, boy, there's so little respect in society today for our fellow man. I don't get it.
Yeah, I hear you. When did the broadcasting bug hit?
Well, my high school coaches said, yeah, you want to be a pro baseball player? You may need a backup plan. So I think I had it for a long time, David. Again, a lot of that goes back to being on a farm. And again, I was only there until 7th grade, 12 years, but literally you sat on a screened in porch with a transistor radio back in the 60s, listening to those great Milwaukee Braves teams that featured Hank Aaron and Warren Spahn and Eddie Matthews. I mean, 3 Hall of Famers right there. Joe Torre, Del Crandall. I can go on and on and on.
Man, you had some great players.
Played the Yankees back-to-back years in the World Series, 57, 58. Tony Kubek, guys, a Milwaukee kid, grew up in Milwaukee, much like Bob Uecker at the same time. And Tony Kubek came back. It's either 57 or 58. It doesn't matter because they played each other each year in the World Series.
Remember it well.
And Tony in one of the first games of one of those World Series at County Stadium, hit 2 home runs in his hometown. And people that were there still talk about it was as quiet as St. Patrick's Cathedral when he was circling the bases, the hometown kid coming back hitting 2 home runs in one game in the World Series. So those were great teams to listen to. And again, when you're on a farm, your closest neighbor might be a half a mile down the road. You're not getting together like you are even in Manhattan or even in Waterloo as far as having neighborhood kids to play with. So that seemed like such a magical thing to do that if you weren't good enough to play, it was like, man, what would be better than being Earl Gillespie and watching Warren Spahn and Lou Burdette and Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews.
I remember Lou Burdette from those 2 World Series. 57? He was the MVP. I remember
Game
that.
7.
They were down. Yeah, man, that was great stuff. So, give me a pivotal moment that put you on the path that got you, it started to get you to where you are today.
You know what? That's interesting, David. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. I just kind of was a worker. God, I hate using the word grinder.
But it is what it is sometimes,
it is,
right?
but I mean, everybody, he's a grinder. And it's like, oh, okay. But I just, I just kind of, after getting out of school, just started about as low as you could and did high school games and eventually got to do some D3 games, eventually got to do some Class A games. Eventually, believe it or not, did Badger football with Earl Gillespie. That is still, for me, I mean, there are moments in your life that, outside of your family, outside of your personal moments, from a professional standpoint, getting the call offering you the job to be with the Indians, getting the call from Cooperstown, getting to work with Earl Gillespie, that's right up there with him. And then I found out that Earl Gillespie, and again, if you aren't from the Midwest, you wouldn't know the name, but he didn't go with the Braves when they went to Atlanta. He was staying in Milwaukee.
Right, I remember.
And then he became the voice of the Badgers and Packers. And he was a phenomenal radio play-by-play guy. And working with him was like, that was as big a deal to me as the first time I met Hank Aaron. And so I don't know that there was one seminal moment, David. I just kind of think, you keep working, you keep getting disappointed. I'll tell you one quick story. I thought it was going to be a breakthrough moment. So I'm working in Appleton, probably doing 50 high school basketball games a year, 24 football games a year, some 25 Appleton Foxes games. That was Class A ball back then for the White Sox. I get a chance to interview for the University of Nebraska play-by-play job, football and basketball. Tells you something about maybe the job. This is late 70s. I drive from Appleton to Lincoln. I'd have to look it up now.
Ooh.
It's not a short drive, probably at least 12 hours. They put me up in a hotel. The next morning I have my meeting, and the guy said, well, there's been a change since we brought you in here. Now, mind you, they brought me in there. I paid for my own gas. We have hired Ray Scott to do our football. And growing up in Wisconsin, Ray Scott did the Packer games every Sunday because those are the Vince Lombardi days. I thought he was the Packers play-by-play guy. He was doing the game for CBS, but the Packers were always featured. So seemingly it was always Ray Scott with those great Bart Starr teams that won 5 NFL championships in 7 years. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, there has been a team that's won 3 straight. It's called Green Bay, 65, 6, and 7. Anyway,
there's that. I love it. It's that Packer pride. I love it. I love it.
The point being, I'm sitting there in the interview going, you hired Ray Scott? And I'm hearing the guy kept going, can you believe it? Can you believe it? We got Ray Scott. And I'm going, so what am I doing here?
He says this to your face.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you have for me? Well, we want you to do the basketball games and be a salesman. So I got back in the car and drove to Appleton because I wasn't going. If I had to live off a commission being a salesman, then I wasn't going to be eating. So But that was kind of one of those moments when you look at it now, you were crushed because you thought, if I can get Nebraska, I'm kind of on my way. That was back in the days, you met Tom Osborne, who was
Yes,
iconic at
sir.
that point. And, when you didn't get that job and you lost out to Ray Scott, who obviously, if you're picking Tom Hamilton and Ray Scott, you're picking Ray Scott. The point I made to him was, doesn't matter who's doing your games if they're competent, because everybody in Nebraska is listening anyway. So that didn't sway him. It was one of those moments though where you were like, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm never going to catch that break." And I always felt, and I've told young broadcasters, I didn't get to where I got because of talent. I just think I got here because a lot of people quit, a lot of people frustrated. And I think if you have a dream, you chase it. You're the only person that can end the dream. And, fortunately, I didn't give up. And again, that's no big accomplishment. But there used to be a lot of guys I would listen to. I'd be like, man, he's so good. And then they gave it up because they weren't making enough money or whatever, and gave people like me a chance.
Believe me, you got talent. Jarrett, let me just throw this in, Jarrett. Ray Scott in the 60s during that Packer run, so often, because growing up in Philly, I'd hear him all the time because the Packers were the team of pro football. And he was working with CBS, and he worked with the greatest simplicity with a fabulous voice. It just go star, and he's watching this on TV call. Star, dollar, touchdown.
Exactly.
But and I got to meet him in the mid '60s. What Tom, you'll love this. He was in New York. I can't remember why he was in New York, but I was doing a simulcast show of my WNBC radio show on MSG Network, and I had Ray Scott and Bob Trumpion
Wow.
on the same show. Matter of fact, it was the night the Mets clinched the National League pennant against Houston. Ray Scott was such a
Was he?
gentleman. I
Yeah.
mean, oh my God, just the best. And I told I fanboyed him and everything. And then I calmed down and we had great conversation. I later met him again at the Super Bowl a few years later. Just a consummate gentleman. He and Marty Glickman, too,
Yeah.
from that generation, two of my favorite people.
Well, think the first Super Bowl, both networks got to do it. So Kurt Gowdy's on NBC.
Yep.
We're obviously watching CBS in Wisconsin, and it's Ray Scott, Jack Buck, Frank Gifford. And I mean,
Yeah.
you're like, at the time you didn't realize it, but those are some massive heavyweights, and that was back,
Oh.
So yeah, but anywho, I never got to meet Ray Scott. That was always a disappointment, but the bottom line was he got to do Nebraska. I didn't.
Is there anything that either of you guys took from him in terms of integration into your way style of how you call a broadcast?
You know what, Jarrett? Maybe for your pops. I didn't, because I was strictly radio then. And what he did on television, you couldn't do on radio. And I
No
didn't
way.
start doing television until I had done the Indians for about 3 years. And then Ohio State asked me to do their basketball package. And then I ended up doing Ohio State and then the Big Ten Game of the Week along with Wayne Larrabee. For like 25 years, I got to do Big Ten television. So for me,
Nice.
Ray Scott would have been much more helpful to listen back to back in the 90s once I started in TV. But for radio, you couldn't get away with that.
He was one of the masters of brevity, yet covering the topic, because it is television and it is a director's medium. But he just had great authority and knowledge of the game, and it was one of those like E.F. Hutton moments when he spoke,
Yeah.
you listened.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, when you look back, then it was about the game. Ray Scott never made it about Ray Scott.
Yeah. That's the beauty of him, no doubt about it. So, what was the first ticket to do the Indians? I mean, what was that? What was the door opener?
We were living in Columbus, and I did, Terry Smith, who now is the voice of the Angels, was the lead guy doing the Clippers. And then our station got the Ohio State rights. And so Terry ended up doing Ohio State, football, basketball, and the Clippers. I got hired to come down, do morning drive sports back in the day when radio stations had news departments. And
Right. Yeah. Good
I
point.
did morning drive. I did the pregame, halftime, postgame for Ohio State, which even then meant a 4-hour pregame and a 3-hour postgame. And yeah,
Whoa. 4-hour
yeah,
pregame?
yep.
Holy
And
man.
nothing has changed, David. They were crazy about the Buckeyes back in the late 80s as they are now. And I volunteered. I said, hey, Terry's got quite a load. Would Terry ever mind? And then I talked to Terry about it. Would he ever mind if he needed a breather for home games? Because obviously, you weren't going to send two people on the road, not AAA. And it was the same radio station doing Ohio State and the Clippers. Would Terry ever mind if I sat in with him for home games? And then the key words I learned a long time ago, I'll do it for nothing, gets you so much work. It's just amazing. How seldom you get turned down when you offer your services for free. But it was a way for me to get back because at that point I'd done a lot more football and basketball on the radio. And because I'd come from Milwaukee to Columbus. And Terry was like, oh my gosh, this would be great. You go from AAA to football to basketball, you have no break. So, Terry was gracious enough to give me 2 innings of play-by-play every night and did that for the home games. Got up at 3:30 in the morning to go do morning drive.
Woo.
Then worked all day getting ready for the Ohio State football game and so on and so forth. But that was the biggest break for me because without getting back and getting reps and getting AAA experience on your resume, I wouldn't be here today.
Let me back up a half a step. Did you get the back end of the Woody Hayes career?
He had been let go prior to that. David, it's interesting because when I did Badger football, the year I did it with Earl Gillespie was 1983. I'm pretty sure. Ohio State played Wisconsin in the Horseshoe. And actually, the Badgers had a bowl team. We were 7-4 that year. We had a quarterback who played in the NFL, Randy Wright.
I know Randy. I did a game with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Guy.
Let's do a little trivia then, Mr. Sims. Who was his star wide receiver?
Oh, I should know
on
this.
The spot. Put you on the spot.
And he was really good.
Isn't that mean?
I love it.
Oh, you're going way back in a Wayback Machine. That door's not opening. Who was it?
Who?
Yes. Jets.
And in my mind,
Altoon,
nothing against Jerry Rice. If Altoon doesn't have the concussion issues that he had, the way he started with the Jets, I mean, he was every bit the equal of Jerry Rice. It's just, but anyhow, that was the Badger stars on that team. And we played at Ohio State that year. They had Keith Byers at running back.
We love Keith Byers with
all my family members in Tecmo Bowl with Keith Byers running that sweep play. That sweep play was killer.
He was really good. But, for me, it was a big deal coming from Wisconsin to do a game at the Horseshoe. I did not understand the significance. I'd never been to Columbus before, but I didn't know what Script Ohio meant. I hadn't paid any attention.
Oh.
Obviously, that's a big deal. Script Ohio at halftime. The guy who dotted the I, which is as big an honor as you can get, was Woody Hayes. And it was the first time he was back in the stadium since he had been fired in the 70s.
When he punched Charlie Bauman from Clemson University in a bowl game.
So I did not, when I got to Columbus, then I did, like I said, that stuff with Ohio State. It was the last 2 years of Earl Bruce and then the beginning of John Cooper. And that Ohio State team,
Gotcha.
the year before, I went to the Cotton Bowl and was there for a week as Ohio State played Texas A&M. Ohio State had a really good team. They were going to be even better the next year. They were going to have Chris Spielman as a senior, Chris Carter as a
Oof.
senior, and that whole senior year unraveled when Chris Carter was caught for having had benefits given to him by an agent. He was ruled ineligible. That Buckeye season unraveled. It cost Earl Bruce his job, and that led to John Cooper being hired.
It's all ripples, right?
Oof.
Butterfly effect. But think how
And now
different the
they do
world
it.
is if NIL, everything was passed back then. Chris Carter would have made $2 million
Well-
like Bijan Robinson before even going to the pros.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of seems foolish now when we look back compared to what we're seeing now. And I know Chris Carter will say to this day, and I don't know Chris, but I've heard enough interviews, it's one of the biggest regrets of his life because he knows he cost that team. They went in thinking national championship that year. They had no chance without Chris Carter. And we obviously later learned how great he was, but it cost that team a potential national championship, cost Earl Bruce his job. And people don't realize Chris Carter, too. His brother Butch was some kind of player at Indiana for Bobby Knight. Chris Carter
Good basketball.
Chris Carter also played basketball at Ohio State. He's one of the greatest athletes to ever come out of Columbus at Ohio State.
You said I'd do it for nothing. So it's so kind of you, that you help out the ball club, the Guardians. They get a Hall of Fame announcer for free. That's amazing. But are you?
I stopped doing it for nothing in 1990.
Are you a Buckeye at heart still? Presumably, you like them to win in the national championship. So
yeah, I mean, home is still Wisconsin, so I'm a Mammoth Badger fan, but I'm every bit as big an Ohio State fan. One, I've now lived in Ohio longer than Wisconsin. We've had children go to Ohio State. And if it weren't for Ohio State, I never get a chance to do Big Ten basketball. So, when you work with a university for 28 years and you get to know everybody, including not only the coaches, the athletic directors, and all of the other people, it's pretty hard not to become a fan of that school. Now, I had to put that aside when I was doing the Big Ten game of the week and not just Ohio State. But yeah, I'm a huge Buckeyes fan, and I think without question they're the most talented team. But we'll see. I think most of us would agree that really the only team that can beat Ohio State is Ohio State right now. But
just like
yeah. Oh, okay. Here we. Things are going so well, Jared. You had to go there. I'm still in mourning, even though I knew the Packers had no chance to win. I was sitting down watching that Packer-Eagle game, very much like Jim Carrey when he goes to, is it Lauren Holly? And he goes, so you're saying there's a chance? Knowing there really was none. So
to the Cleveland Guardians. Great franchise. Let's see. Their last time they won a World Series 48, Larry Doby, who I got to know on a limited basis, wonderful man, one of the great pioneers in our sport and our country.
Who does not get the recognition due him. Everything Jackie Robinson went through, Larry Doby went through 2 months later. That day should be, both guys, in my mind, that both numbers should be worn that day.
14 and 42, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Especially, and we're friends with Larry Jr. and he was a great man. But what kind of interaction did you have with Larry Sr. over the years?
Not much with Larry. I've had more with Larry Jr. And and they're just such a quality family. And class would be Larry. When Larry Doby Sr. was still with us, when he did come to the ballpark, and he had more interaction with Herb, obviously. I mean,
sure.
How certain people walk into a room and have a presence? That was Larry Doby in my mind. And he's just, and nobody knows, and I didn't know him well enough that I would ever question, but that'd be one of those things you would love to sit down, have dinner with him, being from Wisconsin, probably have a couple of beers, and just talk, But he just personified class, and none of us, and you know, as a Caucasian, I have no clue what he went through, none, and wouldn't even, for me to even say I have an idea, that's an insult to Larry Doby, and so I would love to have learned from him more. If I'd have been further along in
Yeah.
my career. I was very intimidated by people like that, and certain people you feel like, you know, it's almost like when I meet certain veterans, I'm not going to ask them share your experiences with me, because the last thing they want to do is share those experiences.
You're talking about armed
Yeah,
forces
yeah,
veterans? Oh, I
yeah,
hear you. I hear you. If they want to talk about it,
there
great.
you go.
I don't go
Yep.
there either. Yeah, yeah. And my old man was in WW2, and I had to drag a lot out of him in his
Wow.
later years. And I later found out that he was part of Patton's Red Ball Express. I said, "You never told me that."
Wow. Wow.
Anyway, he gave me one of those.
Yeah.
Hey, oh.
Like father, like son, real quick. When you got the Yankee job and came home, I heard about 2 dozen stories in the back of the cars we were driving to the ballpark that you'd never told me. So uh, you weren't taking gunfire, but there were still some great stories. So
um, hey, walk us through the experience, Tom. The 2016 World Series. I mean, you came so daggone close to winning
Yeah.
that thing. Rajay Davis, I always salute him every
Well,
time I see him. Give me a feel for what Cleveland was like in that whole experience doing a World Series.
you know, and this always sounds like sour grapes, and it's not, because the Cubs were really good and they earned it.
Yeah.
But we didn't have Michael Brantley, our best player. And we didn't have Carlos Carrasco and Danny Salazar in the rotation. We still had Trevor Bauer, but he was almost inconsequential after his great outing in the very first game of the playoffs. He started ahead of Corey Kluber against Boston and dominated the Red Sox, and then had the drone incident that he nearly severed his
Oh,
little finger. And then, if you remember, he continued to pitch, but when we're in the ALCS in Toronto, he's pitching in Toronto. They have to take him out of the game because literally he's bleeding all over the baseball. And so, yes, he pitched in the World Series, but so we were down to 2 starters. Our number 5 starter, Josh Tomlin, who was phenomenal, and Corey Kluber, who is a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, and until he ran out of gas in Game 7, carried us that October. And then we had a bullpen, getting Andrew Miller from the Yankees that summer. And along with Brian Shaw and Cody Allen, you had 3 closers. And so Tito did everything he could to win games against the Cubs, because, as he told me, I can't play it safe and beat the Cubs. They're too good,
right.
and we're too banged up in the pitching department. And so it was Tito in 2016 that I think led to what we're seeing in the postseason now. Guys not afraid to go to their bullpen at any point in the game, no matter how early it is. Tito did it out of necessity, and did it with a creativity that to this day has been unmatched. Yes, club was up 3 games to 1, but you never felt like, oh, this is over. You knew how good the Cubs were, and you also knew our guys were starting to run on fumes in the bullpen
Mm-hmm.
and in the rotation, and it caught up to us. But that isn't to take anything away from Chicago. They went out, they earned it. I thought Game 7 had the most magical moment in the history of our ballpark, the Rajay Davis home run, a singles hitter with great speed, having a 9-pitch at bat. I believe it was 9 pitches. I could be wrong. 8 or 9.
You had a great call.
Oh, thank you. And I'm battling laryngitis, David, and I'm like, oh, please don't go now.
Rajay Davis's home run was your Jordan flu game, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Thank you, Jared, but I wished. It's the best moment in the history of that ballpark, without any other one close in comparison, because of the drama. People also forget Brandon Geyer had a great pinch hit appearance prior to that. With 2 down, he doubled up the alley in right center to make it a 2-run game. And then Rajay just, it was mano a mano. And Chapman was not going to get beat with anything but his fastball. Rajay kept choking up a little bit more on each foul ball. And then eventually hit that laser down the left field line. And to see that euphoria and agony at the same time in the ballpark, because there were a lot of Cubs fans that had emptied the piggy bank to buy tickets for Game 7. And we had probably, I don't know, 15, 20,000 people outside the ballpark between the arena and the ballpark watching on
You
a
bet.
screen.
Yeah.
It to see those pictures and videos of fans' reaction, that's why we all love this game and do what we do. And you know how lucky you are to be a part of that moment. Was it disappointing? No question. But at the end of the day, I've seen us lose that way. I've seen us have the lead in Game 7, bottom of the ninth inning in Miami, and get beat 97 in extra innings against the Marlins. Hey, I've been lucky enough to be involved in 3 World Series, 2 Game 7s. Jarrett and David, I don't care what anyone says. When you go to bed the night before Game 7, even if you're a broadcaster and have no skin in the game, there's nothing that keeps you up more than thinking about Game 7. It's the most magical phrase in all of sports, Game 7 of the World Series. And to be a part of 2 of them, I know how fortunate I've been. Was it disappointing? Oh, sure. But
Tommy,
I've had a great life.
Tommy, you mentioned something that I thought was very interesting. Sleepless night going into Game 7. What kind of things were running through your mind? As you're trying to get some rest there.
It's funny because Joe Buck was doing the games back then for Fox, and Joe and I had met each other when we were back in 1989 in Columbus. He had 1 year at Indiana University and then was the number 2 broadcaster for the Louisville Cardinals that year, the AAA ball club for St. Louis at that time. Joe's 19 years old when I meet him. And what the heck, I'm 33, 34.
19. Yeah. Wow.
And I'm like, ooh, this guy must be pretty good. Now, yeah, he's Jack Buck's son. That opens the door. Joe kicked it down. And so while we're not close personal friends because we haven't had that much interaction outside of 89 in the minor leagues, and then when I would see him in postseason, of course, my questions then, because he's working with Troy Aikman, in 86, I'm like, what the heck, Joe? The Packers are 4-6. He goes, that's what you're thinking about? And you're in the World Series. I'd be like, all right, give me the insight on McCartney and give me or Mike McCarthy and the insight on Rodgers. What's going on with that dynamic? So we would always talk and laugh beforehand, and Joe's always been very, very nice to me. Joe comes up to me and goes, have you thought about what are you going to say if you win the World Series? But that's keeping you up at nights. Laughs and walks away. That's Joe, because Joe was right. And he was thinking about what he's going to say. I don't believe in scripting anything out, and I want it to be spontaneous, but you also would like to have a little bit of an idea of what you're going to say. But the worst thing you can do is write something out, and then the game never ends the way you think it's going to end. There's not a perfect way. So, you hope the good Lord puts the right words in your mouth and you don't botch it. You just don't, that call could be played forever if you win that game, and you don't want to be the guy that they go, yeah, they won, but what an awful call that was. So that's part of you felt a little pressure from a historical standpoint.
Yeah. But but once you get to the game, you're into the flow. It's so organic, right?
And I mean, say for instance, the World Series ended on Rajay Davis's home run. Would anybody in the blue moon ever been the night before writing down, okay, when Rajay Davis wins this game, this is what I'm going to say? No, I again, if you don't trust yourself or trust spontaneity, I think it comes across as pretty corny or contrived. And so,
100%.
We'll see. 100%. I've never had a chance to call Game 7, and that gives Cleveland a World Series.
Wow.
But I mean, you thought about it for 3 consecutive games because you're up 3 games to 1. You know,
Yeah.
what if tonight's tonight? Oh, what if tomorrow? You know, so there's some of that, but again, at the end of the day, it's still about the game and the players.
I remember, Dad, I asked you what's your home run call going to be 19 years ago, 18 years ago when you started the Mariner job, and you're like, I don't, that's not my thing. Shtick is not my thing. And you didn't have a home run call for how many years? 16 of those years that you like was your go-to every time until it came about organically. And Hey Now just was there organically in the same way Tom you described.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Well, boom with Nelson Cruz, boomstick baby. That was only for him, so that was the only thing I really used. And Hey Now I only used for like super duper general game winning moments or something.
Right.
So yeah, and Marty Brenneman, Tom, David, damn it, call what you see.
Bingo. Jarrett and your dad knows this. If you've got your home run call and you just can't wait to use it, then you're going to go caught by the shortstop as you're halfway through your home run call. And your audience is like, what? Because at the end of the day, people are listening to you. They're not watching it when you're doing radio. And
that is correct.
Yeah, Marty's right because, we all probably lean into one call or another couple of calls. But to me, no home run is ever the same. It's easy to have a home run call when it's Albert Bell hitting the ball 450 feet consistently. Those days are over when guys hit it and you knew it was gone. Not all the time. I mean, your dad's going to know when Aaron Judge hits one out or Giancarlo Stanton, But I mean, you just, you
got to call.
Rely on.
We had call what you see. We had Voter on, Stephen Vogt, manager of the year in the American League, well earned. And it's right before the team re-signed Bieber, traded Jimenez and Naylor, brings back Carlos Santana. What kind of club do you think you have this year?
Yeah, I don't know, David. And every year is different. Even if you bring back the same club, Tito always used to say, you don't pick up where you left off. That doesn't happen that way in sports. And it always takes a while for a team to find its identity. Even if you brought back the same 26-man roster, there's no guarantee it'll be like it was the year before. So I think we're competitive. I think we've always got a chance when we go to spring training to play in October. But again, when you're this franchise, the margin of error is very, very small. If this ball club is decimated by injuries, then they're not going to be able to recover. I'm stunned to this day with what they did a year ago. When you lose Shane Bieber, and David saw Shane Bieber's last outing.
It was against us in Seattle. He was marvelous.
And knew he had a torn ligament. He already knew he was going to have Tommy John surgery, didn't tell anybody, and went and shut him out. And so I don't think we can avoid, or I should say, we can't overcome the kind of injuries we had a year ago again. I think that's too much to expect of a bullpen 2 years in a row. And, hey, Josh Naylor, pretty darn good cleanup hitter. Carlos Santana's tremendous, but he's 39.
And I thought he was going to hang him up.
Well, somebody's willing to keep paying him, and rightfully so. He won a Gold Glove last year. He was Minnesota's top RBI man.
I like him. I like him a lot.
Well, and he's great in the clubhouse. He's become a leader. He's really good at first, which is important because Andres Jimenez pretty much covered everything from the bag at second to within 10 feet of first. That guy's gone now. And so one of the things that predicated this club's success was its ability to catch the ball and make the above average play. We'll see. But again, I really do think they're going to be a contender in the Central. And then, as we've seen in the playoffs, just get in. I mean, I know the Yankees were the prohibitive favorite a year ago, and I'm really tired of reading some of the articles I've read out of New York that, well, New York got to the World Series because they walked through the Central. They didn't walk through them. They had two tough series with Kansas City and with Cleveland. And there's always this agenda, I feel, that, well, the AL Central sucks and blah, 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 blah.
It was last year. It was really good.
It's young. Do the AL Central teams have a $300 million payroll club? Not anymore. Not since Mr. Ilitch died, with the Tigers back in their heyday with Miguel Cabrera. But the bottom line is, those 3 games with Cleveland and New York could have gone any way in Cleveland. And give credit to New York in how they won those games late against an unhittable bullpen. So I just thought some of the mistakes New York made against us, they couldn't get away with against LA because LA is a better team than Cleveland was. But at the end of the day, when you get into October, last year's the first time in when that the 2 heavyweights got to the World Series. When's the last time that
been a long time?
Yeah,
been a long time. Yeah, I mean, 2 big payroll teams, 2 studded teams, and then the Dodgers, they did everything right, and the Yankees base running and pitching and clutch hitting didn't happen.
Well, and what happens if Freddie Freeman doesn't walk off that game right in the beginning of the World Series?
Right.
That changes the complexion of a World Series.
Agreed.
So that's the beauty, I think, of our sport. It's not quite March Madness, but it's got an unpredictability that I don't think many other sports have. I mean, we just went through the wild card round of the NFL playoffs. Games weren't very good, I didn't think, for the most part. And there really weren't any surprises to speak of.
No.
And so, you don't see that in our game. I mean, the wild card round, Detroit upset Houston. I thought at the end of last year, Houston was the best team in the American League. We happened to play them the last week of the season, and they looked like Houston. And then Detroit ambushes them. So who knows?
To quote the late, great Michael K. Williams from The Wire as Omar, it's all in the game. That's the game. I wanted to ask you, Cleveland has a great and very passionate fan base. I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 1983, so I think of Major League, one of my favorite movies. I think of LeBron, putting the team on his back after, taking his talents to South Beach. I think of these moments. But Rajay Davis, by the way, I thought that you guys had it because the momentum, when you just see momentum go one way in sports. But why?
Rain delay.
Rain delay. That's right.
That hurt. But
so
passionate
fan base. People may not know what is it about Cleveland and their fans that is so awesome as a fan base from a sports fan perspective.
Jared, I think a lot of it is because of where it is in the country. Okay, we love Cleveland. It was an incredible place for us to raise our family. And, people take pot shots at it. That's okay. They don't know what they're talking about. They've never lived there. They don't know the people. So it's like, whatever. But it's not what you would call a transient town. It's not like Atlanta or Dallas or Nashville or places where so many people are moving to. Most of the people in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, born, raised, grow up there. So they're passionate. It, in a lot of ways, is very much like where I came from in Wisconsin. I find the Midwest towns, for the most part, their fans are passionate because literally it's been passed down from generation to generation, whatever the sport may be. When you're in Tampa, I don't know of how many families have passed down being a Devil Rays and now a Rays fan. I mean, there's as many Yankee fans in Tampa as there are Tampa Bay Rays fans. So I think we're in a community that is not apathetic. They may not like you, they may love you, but they're not apathetic. And so because of that, I think you have more passion. I think you have people that are there that are proud of where they're from. And that's why, like, when we became good back in the mid 90s, finally, Cleveland was the big bad bully. Albert Bell and the rest of that gang, they were the ones kicking sand in everybody's faces instead of being on the other end of that spectrum. And so there's a pride there that maybe, I love all these other cities I've mentioned, but I have a son now who's a scout with the Kansas City Royals in Nashville. I mean, when he goes to a Packer bar on Sunday to watch the Packers, he said, you can't believe how many other jerseys are being worn by people from all over the country rooting on their team. If you go to Cleveland and if you go into a bar and you're not wearing a Browns jersey,
Oof.
I would get in my car and drive real quick away from that bar because you're not going to be well received.
You could be describing Philly with that last comment just as well.
Bingo. And I'll say something about Philly too. And I said it last year on the air. For all the again stray bullets that city takes, booing, safe landings or booing Santa Claus. I saw something I've never seen before. Last year, we're playing the Phillies. Austin Hayes, first at bat in Philadelphia. They didn't trade for Jackson Holliday, or they didn't trade for Bobby Witt Jr. They traded for a nice player, but a part-time player. A standing ovation. I was floored. This guy is he's in the major league, so he's a good player, but he's not a superstar. But the standing ovation they gave him for his first at bat in Philly, I thought it was Michael Jack Schmidt coming to the plate. And that's the beauty of fan bases like Philadelphia. That to me was like, why don't we hear about this? That's what we never hear about, how great these fans are and how much they care.
I've done a million games in Philly, football, baseball, not so much baseball, but football and basketball. But somebody told me, and I thought it explained it. It's what I live in Philly. The sports fans, they can hate you hard, but they can love you hard, and all they want to see is just emptying the bag all the time. Commitment, and hey, you're not going to win them all, but you got to play hard every minute. And if you do that, you're in permanent scholarship in Philly.
Yeah, I believe it. And that's what you want. You want passion, not apathy.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
They have it in Cleveland. They have it in Philly. Obviously, Yankee fans, as your dad well knows, and I'm so happy. And congratulations again, Dave.
Thank you.
Yankees hit.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Tom. Hey, I'm sure you hear from a lot of aspiring broadcasters, college kids, or guys who are hanging on in the minors. What kind of advice do you like to give guys when they reach out to you?
Same as we gave our 4 children. Follow your dream. Have a passion for something. Follow the dream. You're the only person that controls that dream. You're the one that controls when that dream ends, or you're the one that controls, do I keep chasing it? But follow your dream. I just think there are too many instances in this world, whatever walk of life, it's the people that want it the most that not always are we guaranteed of getting what we want. We also told our kids, I don't want to get religious on you, but you want to hear God chuckle? Tell him your plans. And
good point. That's a great line.
And nothing's guaranteed in life, but if you chase your dream to its fullest, you'll never have any regrets, no matter how it comes out. If you give up on it, then you're always going to wonder what could have been. And I mean, it's pretty simple, but I just so believe in it. And I know I'm a lucky one because I have parents that said the same thing, chase it.
I really love that. And I wanted to ask a follow-up on that is, how do you have the persistence when times are tough to continue? And then the other, side of that, if you can speak to as well, sort of do you have any advice for folks from a leadership perspective, things that you use as sort of core tenets from a leadership perspective?
As far as how do you stick with it, I guess, I don't know. I think that almost has to be something within you, and I don't know. I don't know if it's something you can learn. I guess you can, but one of the things that I fear, like in college athletics, we're creating a generation of quitters. And I had two boys play D1 that waited their time. My oldest son, who started on the team that went to Omaha. I mean, Kent State's not supposed to go to Omaha in the College World Series, but he played behind Travis Shaw. Travis Shaw got drafted, had a really good major league career. But I used to tell Nick, you know how much I love you, but Travis Shaw's a better player. And he goes, I know he is, Dad. But he paid his dues. He waited his time. He didn't transfer. He didn't pout. And then when he got his chance, he capitalized on it. Now, in this day and age, if coach hollers at you, you enter the transfer portal. And I also feel the shoe fits on the other foot, too. A lot of coaches haven't got any loyalty. Nick was lucky he played for a great coach who, when Travis Shaw went to pro ball, he didn't try to go to the transfer portal and find somebody better than Nick. He gave him a chance. So I worry that we're raising, it's too easy to quit. And I just think, once you start quitting, that follows you the rest of your life. Once you quit once, it gets easier every time thereafter. That's what I would say on that. As far as leadership, I don't know if I'm the one to ask about leadership. I just think treat people with respect, be nice to people. I don't consider myself a leader in any way, shape, or form, but I just, it's the old golden rule. Treat people
always in play.
It's so simple. I just think the common sense things haven't changed. And I also learned if you're low maintenance, it's amazing how much work you can get in this business. Become high maintenance and watch how quickly they find other people.
I've seen many an example to that particular line. Closing thoughts here. Favorite ballpark for you to call a game?
Oh boy. I mean, nothing to me beats the history and just being there at Fenway. That is certainly one of them. Seattle has always been one. I love the city, love the park. I think Minnesota is a great ballpark. I really, because, unfortunately, I think, David, we're a victim. People will tell me, oh my gosh, that Pittsburgh park is beautiful. Well, yeah, as long as you're not calling a game, because then you might as well be in the Goodyear blimp calling the game from Pittsburgh. The new
folks.
I mean, David, Washington, Atlanta, Texas, Pittsburgh, beautiful ballparks. But, you talk about getting fooled on a ball that's hit. I'll watch batting practice and go, oh, that's gone. Nope, caught by the shortstop, caught by the second base. So I think you're also maybe skewed a bit based on how you can call the game from that ballpark. I never enjoyed a place more than Old Yankee Stadium. Now, we were playing there in the 90s, and those were really good Cleveland teams and really good Yankee teams. Yeah. And it really felt like year after year, one of those teams was going to go to the World Series. And they had some there has never been a ballpark. We ended up beating the Yankees that year in 1997, but we had a game there where the Yankees hit 3 consecutive home runs in the playoff game. And that old Yankee Stadium booth that we were in, I thought the upper deck was coming down. I thought we were in the midst of an earthquake. And that was always one of my favorites, too.
I remember being there when Girardi tripled against Maddox in a World Series in '96. I was sitting upper deck, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It did feel like the place was going to come down.
And the people that sat in the high-price seats, they don't get those seats anymore. But those people were like, whoa. This is what the Roman Coliseum felt like if you were a Christian and you're out there with the lions and the spectators.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. Best player you've ever seen?
Well, that's slam dunk, Hank Aaron. The only autograph I have. We did a benefit together for a charity function. They flew him into Cleveland. Mr. Dolan did, paid for everything for this incredible charity. And Hank said, I don't want to do a speech. I'd like to do a fireside chat. And I was chosen. And I was like, kind of like Johnny Bench calling you, only now I'm there in person with Hank Aaron. And again, as great a player as he was, I still think he's the greatest player in the history of the game. You can look up the numbers. I don't care what anybody else says. They can pick somebody else. Look at the numbers. And he was an even better human being. So he was the greatest. After that, as far as since I became a broadcaster, man, boy, David, that's hard. I mean, because, I was there when Ken Griffey Jr. had his incredible run. And, how do you ever see a greater talent than he? And you saw Jeter from the get-go. I mean, he got his first major league home run opening day in Cleveland in 1996. And so, I would have to, that would be a really hard one. I mean, you know, I got to call Eddie Murray's 3,000th hit, got to call Robin Yount's 3,000th hit at County Stadium, Eddie Murray, George Brett, Kirby Puckett, those kind of guys. And I don't know how you find better players than them. And then with our ball club, then you start, the amount of players I've got to see in 35 years. I mean, this is one thing I try to tell Cleveland fans when they're disappointed that they haven't won the World Series. Just think, in the last 30 years, Cleveland's been in the playoffs 14 times, 3 World Series. Tell me another market with the payroll restrictions that Cleveland has that basically is in the playoffs every other year. We don't have 5-year, 6-year rebuilds where you're losing 100 games. So, I've gotten to watch Manny and Jim Thome. I mean, you can't think of 2 better hitters than those two. Albert, when he was healthy in his heyday, greatest shortstop I've ever seen was Omar Vizquel. And then got to watch Robbie Alomar and Andres Jimenez. I don't know who you would pick as the best defensive second baseman ever between those two. So I've really been lucky.
Wow, good for you. Favorite Cleveland food spot?
There's a place on the west side we love, Cabin Club. I'm from Wisconsin, so vegetables aren't a big deal. The fish better have beer batter on it. I don't want to hear about sushi. And there better be steak. So
meat, it's what's for dinner.
I'm not as bad as Al Michaels. I will eat corn. I guess Al has never had a vegetable.
Al's it's unbelievable. Prediction for your ball club. 25.
I'm not into predictions. I'm a big believer in what my old partner Herb told me. This is why we play the games. This is why it's still the best thing in the world, because we can't predict. But I do think they'll be in the hunt for the division title. I just think with a club like Cleveland, and I could go through everybody else that's in that payroll of 100 million to 120 million, there isn't much margin for error. That's why what happened last year with the injuries to the starting pitching, I'm still stunned with what that ball club accomplished. Look, I'm not throwing spears at the Yankees or Dodgers, but if they lose somebody, they usually got somebody else pretty good to replace them, or they can go get somebody. If Cleveland makes a mistake on that, people say, well, why is Andres Jimenez traded? Because the contract ended up being a mistake. Nothing against Andres Jimenez, but he's owed roughly $20 million a year for the next 5 years. And Cleveland can't afford that if Andres Jimenez is going to be a 240 hitter with 40 RBIs. He's the best, I think, defensive player at any position in baseball. And what he does defensively saves, obviously, a boatload of runs. But Cleveland can't afford that kind of a contract unless you're putting up the numbers Jose Ramirez puts up. So when they make that kind of a commitment, it better work out. Otherwise, they can't live with it. So I do think they're a contender. And I know that sounds like an easy out, but I know one thing, there are a lot of teams going camp this spring in Florida and Phoenix that have no chance of playing, and they know that going in. They have no chance of playing in
Gotcha.
October. Cleveland has a chance, and a legitimate chance.
We asked all the great questions. There's just one that was bugging me. Do you ever get, especially with the highlighter, does anybody ever come up to you and say, hey, coach, I saw you in that commercial last night, or thanks for all the wins at Bama?
Hasn't happened, Jared, but I'm willing to take that phone call. I've been flipping highlighters in the air since I was doing high school basketball games in Watertown, Wisconsin. Didn't know I was doing it, and you'd be sitting in the corner of the gymnasium floor on a table, and people would come up to you afterwards. How are you flipping that pen and catching it, calling the game? I was like, what are you talking about? So, some bad habits are hard to break.
Hey, Tom, really appreciate you
A lot
giving
of
us some
fun. Thank
time.
you.
Enjoyed the heck out of it. Couldn't be more
Thank you,
thrilled.
guys.
Couldn't be more thrilled that you're going into the Hall of Fame with
Thank
the
you.
Frick Award. And I look forward to seeing when the Yankees come to Cleveland.
David, Jared, it's been an honor. Thanks so much for having me. And this was a blast. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Dave Sims from the Hey Now podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us here on the Hey Now podcast.
I can't stand